Hello, my name is Mark Bauer, and I'm here to tell you about the journey one of our customers took on modernizing their infrastructure, underpinned with a very nice way to handle data security. So if you haven't heard about Comforte, we've been around for about 2 decades, but most recently, we've expanded our capabilities into the data security world from our origins in mission-critical transaction and IT security that underpins the world's leaders today. We have a capability to help organizations discover risk and understand how to protect structured, sensitive data wherever it goes. So if we look at the world of data security today, there are 3 things that drive customers to use our technologies, which I'll detail in a moment. We have a new way of thinking about compliance under the privacy regulations that kicked off with GDPR in Europe. We've seen the same kind of regulation echo around the world, with the United States implementing state-level data privacy kicked off by California, with most recent state of Virginia adding theirs. But of course, it doesn't stop there. Brazil has the LGPD regulation, South Africa, the POPIA, New Zealand has its Data Privacy Act, and so forth. And the difference here is that, unlike the past, where we collected data and processed it as we needed it and put up a privacy policy as a result, today information is donated to enterprises under consent. And that requires a different way of thinking about it under the rules and regulations that we now have in front of us. It's a culture and a technology change. Now, of course, when we're thinking about information management and transformation, we have organizations going through their transition to cloud architectures, going beyond just migrating and lifting and shifting to refactoring into this new hyper-agile world. This brings together operational and machine intelligence platforms on a very agile basis like never before. But when we think of the traditional controls of this hyper-agile ecosystem where change is the norm, traditional controls tend to be ineffective. Techniques like DLP, access controls, and data at rest protection, while important, certainly don't align to the agility needs and the fact that data may be processed and used almost anywhere, including out of our control. So let's take a look at what a modern data privacy ecosystem might look like. So typically, we'll have our classic operational platforms, here illustrated on the left, our existing enterprise applications, processing customer data, helping the business grow and drive revenues. We might have also used devices and sensors to acquire information from new types of sources. And of course, with the inevitable cloud and SaaS applications, taking data both in and out of an organization, we've got a lot of sensitive data to deal with. But organizations are shifting towards data engineering capabilities to tie together what used to be the warehouse or the big lakes or the data lakes for big data, and moving this into a more continuous analysis process where we take operational data from all of those sensors and applications and process it for new insights, for extremely fast results, for competitive insight, change, and dynamics. And of course, to manage this and to take the full advantage this architecture brings, including the cloud, it needs a unified way to govern and handle sensitive data that's largely agnostic of the platform and can live in this world of change without you having to make changes for it. But first, if we think about the classic way organizations have protected data to date, it typically revolves around a few technologies: data at rest encryption, data in motion encryption, or application access rules. And at the end of the day, if we're just decrypting data out of at-rest storage, moving it into an application ecosystem, we're endlessly decrypting and re-encrypting that data, which exposes us to potential gaps and threats. And this is precisely where ransomware comes in, where insiders play, where we might have misconfigurations that cause data leakage, and of course, the accidents that people impose. So we have this problem of discontinuity of protection, which then gets much worse when we start to look at this in a cloud context, where change is even more aggressive. We have less control. We might be using container technology that includes data storage and processing, where we don't have great visibility or observability of data that's going in and out of these systems, which might change every second. So if we had a way to close those gaps and to do it in a way that's very simple and straightforward, we could certainly balance that data and operational risk that we've outlined and help reduce the exposure from these exploitable gaps. So how we do this is actually quite a simple and straightforward idea, but to do it at scale and to do it in a very cloud-friendly way is a complex challenge, which certainly we have solved. So here we have personal and sensitive data that's being captured by an application, which we then instrument transparently to allow that data to be secured so that what is stored in a database or what moves into a data lake remains protected. And this information can inherit much of the properties of the original live data. So we can run analysis on it. In many applications, we can use it live. We don't have to expose the live data, but when we do, we can very granularly control that information so that you have very tight control and governance over that data, irrespective of where it's gone and where it's used, so that you've got total control. And if you have an attack or compromise, then the attackers get nothing of value. So it sounds like a great technique, but it's not just looking and trusting us, the vendor. We've worked with industry, including leading standards bodies, to help standardize this technology under the ANSI X9 committee, which is a financially services-oriented standard you often find in the payments world. But the technology sounds great, but it's difficult traditionally to deploy because we have applications that run in the data center, across SaaS applications, across partner networks. We might have some applications sitting in one cloud and others in our own private cloud, and possibly others elsewhere, processing and managing sensitive data. And this ecosystem changes all the time, particularly when we're thinking of the cloud, and different lines of business may have their own preferences. And so we need a way to centralize data security, unify it across all of these hyper-agile ecosystems so that we can underpin transformation with a secure data security as a service approach. So let's talk through really quickly a scenario for a large client that went through this exact journey. So this is an organization that was faced with significant data privacy, and data infrastructure complexity, just like many enterprises today. Not everybody has completed their transformation journey, and indeed it may be a never-ending journey that has to be constantly managed from a risk standpoint. So this client had a large number of compliance problems, not least of which was the NACHA regulations, which were pending in July this year. They'd been deferred from COVID last year, and it revolves around protecting banking details. So it's similar to PCI DSS around credit cards, but applies to the personal and sensitive information related to bank-to-bank payments. So it's quite an extensive and complex reg. And of course, there were other privacy regulations also on the horizon that this organization wanted to get ahead of. The ecosystem was also complex, consisting of traditional legacy infrastructure for things like insurance claims processing, but of course, moving towards these hyper-agile ecosystems. When they looked at their ecosystem, they found a number of compliance challenges. Some were in the science environment, or applications there were being blocked essentially from personal data risk exposure. And of course, in the core production systems across emerging SaaS applications and their traditional line of business IT services that were still underpinning the core aspects to the business. Now, there was one particular problem that really stood out that was difficult to solve. And it might seem simple, but without some novel techniques and a transparent approach, it can be very hard to solve. And here's what it looked like. So just like many organizations today who have customer-facing applications and collect personal data, this organization had agents working on its behalf, servicing clients. And no matter how many times you told them not to put personal data into the applications, they did because it was convenient, simple, and efficient. So ultimately, the organization had a very large amount of personal data in things like quoting and claims processing systems. What we were able to do is pick out that sensitive data, replace it with the randomized tokens, if you will, maintain the rest of the data that's used for analytics and science, and to do this very transparently. So in this example here, we can see that as that data is then moved, it stays secure. It's end-to-end protected. The data can remain protected that handles the analytics, like the customer complained, or the customer is very angry, or the customer slipped on ice. That's the kind of information that can be used by machine learning algorithms to drive customer experiences and optimize outcomes. And of course, when you can de-risk data like this, you can also get back under the right controls to the original and live data. So a very powerful technique for closing those gaps across both the operational systems on the left and the data science environments on the right. And so a centralized, gapless data security approach that can be consumed by the businesses from sources to destination across the data lifecycle. Now, of course, implementing this transparently comes with several advantages. The traditional way of doing this is often with an API-based approach, which requires application changes, requires specialized resources, and probably a multi-development team. Looking at this, the solution was able to be implemented around 4 to 5 times faster using this transparent approach than the traditional way. And when it came to commercial off-the-shelf applications like a master data management system, which is from Informatica, this transparent approach was really the only way to be able to do this in a very efficient manner for compliance deadlines. But of course, as the data had been protected in the source systems, it was also protected as it moved and was used in the science platforms. So getting those outcomes, like I illustrated, just required a couple of days of work so that the outcomes as tokenized data could then be reconstituted and customer success be acted on. Now, of course, this can be applied to any kind of organization faced with privacy rules or compliance needs around data privacy and protection. And the use cases typically fall into 4 categories: protecting production data, enabling the security and de-identification of non-production data, so test and dev, analytics, or machine intelligence. And then the ability to protect data in the cloud, where it may not be in your control, or move data across borders, maintaining control and compliance in this hybrid IT world. And last of all, of course, and not forgetting that we might have mission critical systems where we need to retrofit security to applications or cloud applications that we're lifting and shifting into this new world. And this can allow you to modernize to current contemporary privacy compliance requirements without a heavy investment. It's all delivered from the essentially the DevOps environment, fits into this modern ecosystem, very friendly with a cloud native backbone to allow data security as a service to be automatically instrumented and then consumed by the business on demand. And of course, this can be underpinned by automated data lineage discovery. So if you're concerned about not knowing where your data is and what risks you have, we can figure that stuff out as well. So that's it from me. If you'd like to learn more, drop by the website or email us at info@comforte.com. Thank you.